I'm Stephanie Woodruff, and I'm running for mayor of Minneapolis.
Yeah.
I do hug. I am a hugger.
Okay.
I am a hugger. I'm Stephanie Woodruff, and I'm a Democrat, and I'm endorsed by the Independence Party, and this is my first time running for an office and running for mayor. And I jumped in late. I jumped in mid-June, right after the DFL convention when they did not endorse anybody. And you know, the last 4 years that I've served as an appointed official, as the mayor's appointee, as vice chair of the audit committee, which is a volunteer, non-paid position, I've kind of seen this, you know, I've got kind of this inside view as to the lack of transparency around, you know, all these decisions that are going on. So it kind of just propelled me to kind of jump in, because when there was no endorsement, I wasn't really happy with what I was seeing in terms of the platforms and the candidates and kind of the old guard, new guard, and I think that the city of Minneapolis and the residents are really hungry for something new. They're hungry for new leadership. I think that the city has been complacent, and you know, I think people are really hungry for that. And when I jumped in, people advised me that, you know, just keep it real, just be yourself. And I think that the last 4.5 months on the campaign, it's been exactly that. I mean, my opponents have spent, you know, roughly about $1.6 million, and I've spent less than $10,000. And I think what it demonstrates is that I am viable because of the message, because of the endorsement with the Independence Party, even though I am a proud Democrat. I think that, you know, we share the same passion to put people first, and it is something that's different and it's new, and it's just getting back to the basics.
So can you briefly tell me about your top priorities if you were elected mayor?
Yeah, I mean, number one priority is to put neighborhoods first. You know, our neighborhoods and our kids, in terms of, you know, investing and getting back to the basics and making sure that, you know, they come first. With that, I think that's the only way that we're going to disrupt this cycle of poverty, in terms of getting back to the neighborhoods, investing along our riverfront, and turning the river from, you know, it has got to become our front door, not our back door. A lot of opportunities along the Upper Harbor Terminal, which is near, you know, our poorest neighborhood. I think there are a lot of different things in terms of development that would spur transit, that would, you know, totally lift entire neighborhoods up, and that, you know, getting back to that in terms of focusing on the neighborhoods versus just focusing downtown. And I think the numbers are there. I mean, we've spent something like $340 million on the central riverfront, which has generated about $1.9 billion of private investment. So it does work. It's just that we've got to focus on those underserved neighborhoods and put those people first, versus big, you know, projects that don't advance our jobs issue, our poverty, and our education issue.
So I'm going to jump into some of the questions first, and then I'm going to come back to ranked choice. You know, you say that you want to bring neighborhoods first, and
Yep.
we have talked, I've been to some press conferences where you've talked about the Viking Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about your view on the stadium and how it affects neighborhoods?
Yeah, I mean, that entire deal, in terms of, you know, changing the charter to take away the vote, and you basically, you know, $678 million over the next 30 years. So it's the initial $150 million for construction and another $189 million for ongoing, which over 30 years grows to $678 million. That could have been, it equates to $30 million a year in the sales tax that's available, that could have gone directly into our neighborhoods for economic development and growth, period. Now, I'm all for development. I'm all for creating jobs. I'm a business owner myself. But that deal alone for $678 million, in my mind, does not create sustainable jobs for the next 30 years. If I'm going to write a check for $678 million, and they're saying that that's going to create 7,500, you know, construction jobs, then those 7,500 workers should go to work there every day for the next 30 years, and that's not the case. So we've got to get back to making smarter investments that are going to advance our issues.
So you said at one of the debates that you didn't think that the Viking Stadium would, quote, create real jobs. Can you clarify that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it's what I mean by real job. I mean sustainable living wage careers. So a construction job, right, is a job, but for the site that they're going to every day, that I'm paying, that our neighborhoods, right, if we're gonna foot the bill for this, right, to create jobs, if they're saying that it's a jobs machine, then how come those jobs are not going to be, they're not going to be there for the next 30 years. That facility is going to be open, what, 10 days a year for Vikings games and then other, you know, maybe concerts or whatever. But it's not going to employ those folks every day like we go to work every day, like you go to work every day, right? It's not, for that money, for that project, in my mind, those are not real sustainable jobs. A job has got to be sustainable. It's got to be a living wage career. That's the only way we're going to disrupt the cycle of poverty and pull people up.
So a couple more questions on that. You know, as far as leadership in bringing the Viking Stadium here, particularly maybe with the role of the mayor, RT Ryback,
Yep.
do you have any thoughts on what they could have done differently, or do you think that they sold out neighborhoods by doing this? Or
I totally think they sold out neighborhoods, and I think the way the whole deal went down. I mean, we were kind of in the, you know, it was kind of the fourth down. You know, the clock was running. We were running out of time. We were up against, you know, everything else, and I just think that the way that they put that deal together, you know, to change the charter, to take away that vote, is just totally sold out the neighborhoods. I mean, it's, you know, and like I said, I'm not against development if it's a win-win. If it's a win-win, we should encourage development. But you can't socialize the downside and privatize the upside. That is not a sustainable model, right? So with that deal now, $30 million a year over the next 30 years that could have gone to the neighborhoods, right? So how do we, you know, spur development? And, you know, whether it's, the thing is, in the economic times that we live in today, there are so many external factors that we can't control, right? With the local government aid, with what's happening in Washington today, there's just so much. The world we live in today is very different, right? So we have got to be able to be self-sufficient. We've got to be able to make decisions that are more self-sufficient, that invest locally, right, to create those jobs so they are sustainable. Because when economic times are hard, like when all the LGA was pulled away, we don't have to keep going back to the taxpayers to, you know, to raise property tax. Property taxes have gone up 300% for the last 12 years. So the question is, well, where's all that money gone? Our services have been cut, right? We're down in fire and police. The neighborhoods, the money to the neighborhoods have been cut. I mean, all these things. Yet, you know, we're throwing these big projects, you know, for like $1 billion. It's just not sustainable.
So, what would you do differently, specifically, moving forward to break this cycle of poverty?
Yeah, I mean, it's the cycle of poverty is, you know, you can't just look at it in a vacuum. So it's, you know, it's living wage careers that are sustainable. It's smart transit decisions that improve the livability of our neighborhoods. It's, you know, getting back to and focusing on this achievement gap in terms of our education, and investing in early childhood programs, and my idea to leverage our existing Capitol buildings in the park system to create learning labs. So all these things together that we can be doing that don't take a lot of money. It's more about priorities and focus to lift people, to try to disrupt that cycle of poverty. And I think that, you know, neighborhood by neighborhood, it's different. I mean, the solution maybe on the north side is different than the solution on the south side. I mean, we've got struggling neighborhoods, and, you know, Powderhorn and Longfellow, you go in the East Lake, all those businesses that are boarded up, and then you go on the north side, which is, you know, horrible. So there's different, you know, it's got to be, it's not a one size fits all. You know, it's got to be very specific. And even if you start block by block, lifting people up, I think that we can disrupt this cycle of poverty.
So I want to briefly touch on transit. What are your thoughts on improving transit?
Yep.
Specifically, what's your thoughts on streetcars?
Yep. I mean, I'm a fan of streetcars, but I'm not a fan of this streetcar proposal for Nicollet Avenue for 3.2 miles for $225 million, which is our share, $60 million. So it's diverting $6 million for the next 10 years. And what it is, they call it a revenue capture, but it's not true revenue capture. It's revenue diversion. Now, a true revenue capture is when you lay the rail, and then it spurs development, and you capture that revenue and pay for the line. It makes sense, right? Well, they're taking existing luxury properties that are already in development. They're diverting those new property tax revenues to pay for this line. Now, the Met Council stepped in and said, well, wait a minute, you haven't even involved us in this, right? Transit has got to be planned on a regional, it's got to be a regional effort, right? And it shouldn't be paid by property taxes on the backs of the residents of Minneapolis. Now, like with the Southwest Light Rail, right? Now, I know that this is probably not a very popular answer, but I was the only one that stepped up and said that I would give consent for that line. I think that it has to be a regional focus. For the last 7+ years that has been in development, the risk of losing almost $700 million of federal funded for that line, and what the research, what I've read, they said that they think that along that corridor that there's an additional 60,000 jobs that will be, as part of that within, St. Louis Park, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, and so forth. So I would love to have those new residents live downtown, be able to hop on the train and go to work to, United Health Group or whatever. I would not want to lose those folks to either moving to St. Louis Park or Eden Prairie or Minnetonka. We've got to address it on a regional basis. And that's why they're looking at kind of these 5 starter streetcar lines. It's got to be regionally done. It's got to be regionally funded, so that we have regionally transit-oriented development. So that when we do development, we've got transit right there, so that we can move these folks.
And would you at all work on the north side to improve transit? Because a lot of people on the north side complain that they can't get anywhere except for their own little area.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge issue, and it relates to the with the development, with the lack of development up there. If we were to invest along the river and the Upper Harbor Terminal, then definitely as part of that development plan, the transit would be a big piece of that. But like I said, it's got to be regional, where you look at those priorities to say, okay, let's target this area because that's our most underserved neighborhood. And if we put X amount of money, it's going to yield X. We have to look at the ROI to say, okay, this is a good investment. Let's make this investment because it helps disrupt the cycle of poverty. It creates living wage careers. It moves people to those jobs and so forth. You have to look at it strategically, has to look at all together.
So I think almost all of the candidates agree that education is a major issue in the cycle of poverty, and you've said the same. Can you tell me a little bit about your promise as far as your salary for education, and can we move from there?
Yep. I have pledged that I would defer half of my salary. So the mayor's salary is $106. That I would, starting from day one, that I would defer half, so $53,000 into a separate account. That at the end of the year, right, if our kids, our minority kids, are not improving their test scores, right, then I would not draw that salary. Okay, and I did that pledge to basically say that I'm serious about this issue in terms of putting my money where my mouth is. I think the entire achievement gap that we have failed is that no one has really stepped up to demand the results and to have the leadership that's required in this issue. Now people say, I can't believe we're even talking about this because the mayor doesn't have any authority. But you know what? It is the mayor's responsibility, right, to make sure that our kids are thriving, right? Because that affects everything. If our kids aren't graduating, where are they ending up? They're ending up on the street, and that affects crime, jobs, investment, it doesn't make it attractive for companies to move here. So I 100% support Superintendent Johnson in the new SHIFT program, which is a way to identify the underperforming schools in the partnership zone and to give them more flexibility to address and to demand those results for a greater accountability. And basically what Superintendent Johnson said, it's time to get off the dime and start, holding people accountable. And that's, even Mayor Ryback admitted in his 12 years that was his greatest area that he didn't do enough in, right? And it's not impossible. I mean, everybody else is doing it, right? The public school system is pretty standard across the entire United States. Yet we have the worst achievement gap in America, but we spend almost $23,000 per student. So we're spending so much money for poor results. So it's got to be a number one focus in terms of providing support to make sure to bring everybody together to make sure that everybody owns this issue, that we're going to make progress.
So what would it take for you to give away or to defer this $53,000? What measurement are you using as far as succeeding?
Yep,
or
I looked
failing?
at basically the test scores on the minority kids for reading and writing. The ones that were just released, the proficiency scores were 22%.
Right.
So, I mean, I would use that, the reading and writing proficiency scores. And so...
And what do they need to be for you?
It just has to improve.
Conceding.
It just has to. It just has to improve. If it doesn't improve, then I don't. I shouldn't, as the mayor, I shouldn't. The average household income in this city is about $55,000. So people should hold me accountable for that. If I'm not stepping up and being that leader to demand those results, then in my mind, that I don't deserve that money. And I want to take that money then and put it into my learning labs, to help improve this initiative. But, taking a very simple test score like that and measuring to make sure, that will hold me accountable to make sure that, I'm there demanding those results. Because it's got to stop. Enough is enough. We cannot, this is not a sustainable model to be the great city that we are, yet we have the worst achievement gap in America.
So talk to me about these learning labs. Where did you get this idea? Why are you so passionate about it?
I got the idea. I mean, I'm part owner of a technology company. So, I had this idea. And I'm big into technology and TED Talks, and I've been all over the world, and as a business owner, and I think there's just so much that we can do leveraging Wi-Fi and cloud technologies. My business, my software company is pretty big in India, so I've seen where, and I've lived in Singapore for many years, and I've lived in Asia years ago when I was the Asia Pac audit director for Cargill. Back in the early 90s. So I've traveled all over the world, and I've been in the most remote areas, some of the poorest areas in the world, and yet those kids are learning because they're using and leveraging technology. So then I had this idea, well, why don't we have this idea of learning labs? And I started chatting with my team, and actually it was Paul Ostro, my campaign chair, through the idea about leveraging our existing park buildings. And I thought, God, that's a brilliant idea. We're leveraging a capital asset that's already there, so you don't have to spend any more money. Studies show that when you start early with early childhood centers, and I started asking the question, and I was shocked that we really don't leverage a lot of those park buildings. And within the city of Minneapolis, our neighborhoods are within 6 blocks of a park. It just made sense. And then I took it a step further and thought, I was reading an article in the New York Times, and it talked about how, the technology and tablets, and then, I thought, okay, learning labs, let's see, no child left untableted. And when I actually talked to a lot of the parents on the north side, the first thing they told me when I gave them that idea, I mean, they were so happy. They said the reason a lot of their kids can't do homework is they can't afford the internet, right? And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, we have the Wi-Fi. Why aren't we giving access, like from like 3 in the afternoon when school is done till maybe 7 in the morning? I mean, the cable, it's already there. It's not an additional cost, right? So there's so many things that we can do to be creative. Like I said, neighborhood by neighborhood, to be more proactive, to leverage technology, right? Because other countries are doing it, and they're doing very well.
But are tablets really the way to do it? I mean, I've heard you talk about a little bit about internet access,
Yep.
which I think, now it's a human right to have internet access.
Right.
But are tablets the way to go?
Well, I'd call it a tablet or call it a smartphone. I know when I sat in on Superintendent Johnson's shift presentation, I was shocked when they said the amount of kids in the Minneapolis public schools that had access to a mobile device was something like 80%. So I mean, a lot of them have the technology, right? But maybe it's by having access to tablets, maybe it's for the parent. I mean, maybe, there's so, with the Khan Academy and other, there's so much online. Maybe it's about nutrition, maybe it's about healthy cooking, maybe it's about anything to engage families, right, to make smarter decisions. My point is, the sky's the limit. It's free. Right? And if we can partner with maybe, technology companies, and technology changes every day, right? I mean, you can get a tablet for like $50 or a new phone. The point is that it's the sky's the limit, right? And that's the way I think in terms of, throw ideas out there, kind of put them all together and see what's possible.
So I'm going to move on from kind of the issues that are central to you to your campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this year is the first time we're using ranked choice voting. Did that change affect the reason that you wanted to run, and would you have run if it wasn't ranked choice voting?
Great question, Kitty. I probably would have never run if ranked choice voting didn't exist. I'm a perfect candidate for ranked choice voting. I come from the outside. I've never run before. I don't have a political background. I'm a political name, and ranked choice voting gave me that opportunity because it allows me to to kind of be that outsider and appeal across the broad spectrum, especially as a Democrat and endorsed by the Independence Party, and bringing kind of that business experience with my current insider experience as vice chair of the audit committee.
So I don't know if you know this, but some of the other candidates have hired ranked choice voting consultants for their campaigns.
Yeah.
Did you hire a consultant?
I haven't hired anybody for my campaign. That's why our campaign totally has spent less than $10,000, and my opponents have spent $1.6 million. So, I have a lot of smart people. Paul Ostro is my campaign chair. Spent many years as council president and budget chair. Matt Lewis, who's incredible. I mean, from the Independence Party. Dan Lindstruck, my communications director, and Jessica Melheim, my policy director. I mean, we're pretty smart doing the research and tapping into kind of what the knowledge is. But no, we didn't pay any consultants.
Well, are you changing your strategy, or did you have a different strategy because it's ranked choice?
No, I mean the strategy when we jumped in was just keep it real, keep it positive, kind of stay above the fray of the political games with the super PACs and the money, and kind of I think what happened when the DFL convention finished and no one emerged as an endorsed candidate, kind of the top two camps at that point were kind of going at each other. And I think that kind of remained throughout the campaign. And that was a positive for us, because we just kind of stayed on the outside. We were always, and still yet today, I think have remained very positive and focused on the message about putting people first. And I think that I deliver that message well because that's my personality, just from who I am. Being a lesbian, growing up on a farm. I mean, this is just who I am in terms of getting back to the basics. So I think the team that was assembled which, you know, I didn't know any of these guys. They just kind of all, we just kind of all fell together. And it's been an amazing experience because I think we've learned so much. But it's been an incredible honor to represent my team. And like I said, because of ranked choice voting, I think I aligned well with all the other candidates, you know, in terms of the message and who I am. So I'm very proud of that.
So you've said before, and you said today, that you consider yourself the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you won't get the first choice from a lot of voters, but are you asking for their second or third choice?
Yeah, I mean, I am still asking for their first choice because I believe that I still have enough to, you know, to make it through the first round before I would drop off because of the way the polls are. I mean, I think myself and Jackie and even Mark Andrew were tracking, give or take the margin of error, we were pretty much even. So, you know, and I think that since that poll, we've gained huge momentum. So, yeah, I mean, I asked for their first choice. But I'm also a realist knowing that, you know, I jumped in on June 21st. So, you know, a lot of people came up to me and said, wow, you know, you're so glad you're in the race. You're amazing. You know, however, I've already made up my mind, but you're my second choice, which is, you know, great. So, you know, I think this race is actually going to go down to people's third choice because I think there are so many great candidates in this race that it's so close. I think after probably 10 to 12 rounds, right, I think it's going to go to who was the third choice. I mean, that's just my gut. You know, we've done the research, what happened in San Francisco and Oakland and others. And like I said, we just, you know, I ran this campaign on keeping it real, just, you know, who I am, being consistent with the message and keeping positive. And, you know, I am an underdog because they don't know who I am. I mean, you know, looking back, yeah, I wish I had more money, of course, because I think that I'm the best candidate to be mayor. And, you know, win or lose, at the end of the day, I feel very proud of the campaign that we're able to do so much with so little because the message is right, right? And, you know, it's Minnesota politics, so at the end of the day, anything can happen, right? You know, so we're looking forward to it.
So in my last couple questions, I want to address you as a person and how you're different than other candidates. So, you know, both personally and professionally, what differentiates you from the other 34?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, I mean, just that I think being gay is the number one thing, and I know my opponents are very, you know, have been, you know, proponents for gay rights for years, and I admire that for them, and that's not, I'm not taking that away from them, but it's different when you actually are gay, and when you grow up. When I did in the, you know, I was born in '65, in the '70s and the '80s. Started my career, you know, in the late '80s at Cargill, a very traditional conservative company, you know, for almost 12 years. I traveled the world, and I became an executive very young there. You know, moved to Singapore, lived in Singapore for 3 years, where being gay is against the law, right? But I never, you know, I was always out and open who I am, because I never made it an issue, because I let my performance speak first. And I think that has served me well over the last 30 years about my accomplishments, you know, in business and just in life. So, I mean, I think that has really taught me, and growing up, you know, in a small town in Iowa, I mean, we were, you know, practically dirt poor. I mean, didn't have anything. I mean, barely had enough money to go to college. I worked myself through college. I played softball in college, and literally had to stop playing softball after 2 years because I couldn't afford to play because it wouldn't allow me to work. So, you know, all of the hard work and the choices, you know, that have shaped me, I think make me very different. My foreclosure that I experienced, right? Now, that was something that, launching a business in June of '07, and then when the market crashed in August of '08, which is the worst economic time since the Great Depression. I mean, companies were falling left and right. I mean, General Motors, bankruptcy. I mean, all these huge companies. Something totally outside of my control, right? But I held on, right? Held on till like 2010, and just couldn't do it. I haven't had a paycheck in 7 years, but kept the company going. It's thriving now because I put, you know, you put your employees first. Those experiences, right, good or bad, have shaped me and made me who I am. In terms of that bold leader that's really not afraid, I'm not afraid of anything, right? I mean, you could throw it at me, it is what it is. I'm like, all right, we'll get through it, whatever. But if you stay consistent and you stay positive, and you know, you have a value system, right? And you don't waver from that. In the end, you know, you'll win.
So, as far as public perception and media perception, what have we gotten right about you, and what have we gotten wrong about you?
You know, I think the press and the public has been very positive. You know, I think the one thing there's always confusion about, that I'm the Independence Party candidate, which is not quite true. I'm a DFL candidate that's endorsed by the Independence Party. So I think that's you know, maybe the only thing, and I can't. I mean, I think that given the fact that I jumped in and I was truly a nobody, I mean, I think that the press has been very. I think I've gotten more press lately. You know, I was a little disappointed that the Star Trib editorial board did not cover me, which I was shocked, because I'm, you know, on the voter guide on the Star Trib, the voter guide on the Journal. You know, one of the obviously the NPR, the top 8 profiled. So I mean, I actually was shocked around that. But you know what? It is what it is. It's politics. You know, there is a level of game playing. And you know, I'm not going to worry about it. That's, you know, you look at who the Star Trib editorial board has endorsed the last few races, and those people have lost. So, you know, I don't really get hung up on it. We stay positive. We're putting people first, and we feel good come November 5th that the people are going to speak, and it's going to be very positive.
So, in my last and closing question, if you couldn't vote for yourself in this upcoming election, who would you vote for first, second, and third?
Yep. You know, that's a tough one, because there's so many, you know, there's so many great candidates, even, you know, outside of the 8. And, you know, I align very well with a lot of them. And, you know, like Don Samuels, I admire his passion around education, because that's a big part of mine. But I don't agree with him with the stadium vote and the vote with the Ryan deal and streetcars. You know, and there's just so many, and Cam Winton, you know, coming from the outside and business. But, you know, he's a Republican who supported Mitt Romney. As a woman and as a lesbian, I can't. That's hard for me to get over. I mean, he says he's socially inclusive, but it just goes against my values. But he's a great candidate. He's got great ideas. You know, I have the utmost respect for Mark Andrew in terms of his level of service over the years. I know public life is not easy, and you know what he's been able to do in his business. I have the utmost respect for Councilmember Hodges in terms of her service. However, I don't think that she has really stepped up as a leader, particularly even though her vote on the Viking deal was a no, it was a silent no. She had every opportunity to step up and fight that as a budget chair. But then subsequently, the vote on the Ryan deal, the streetcars, and now the Target Center. Jackie Cherry Holmes, I've never met her till now, and I have the utmost respect for her knowledge and her passion around the neighborhoods, and she's very, very knowledgeable in terms of the issues. Bob Fine, same thing. I've never met him before. He is quite the character. He surprised me Wednesday night at the debate at the BLB when he stripped down into a Superman suit. So gotta give him credit for that. And Dan Cohen, you know, I've never met him before this campaign. I have the utmost respect. Here's somebody who, you know, at his age, and who is very passionate. I mean, we're all very passionate. We all want to do the right thing. But we just all come from different, you know, backgrounds. And even the other, 27 candidates. I mean, you know, they're out there, you know, a lot of them are out there every week at the, you know, the People's Plaza doing their thing. And, you know, I admire that. I mean, coming from the outside, you know, we all have something a little bit different, and, you know, anything can happen. It's, you know, whether it's you hit it on the right day, or, you know, you have the right message, or the right mojo, or the energy, whatever it is. You know, I admire everyone, because now, you know, now that I'm in it, I kind of see it. It's a lot of work. It's a huge commitment, and it's sometimes it's very frustrating. You know, I see people on the north side, I see extreme poverty, I see struggling, families, and it's hard. It's hard to kind of remove that and not get so emotional, because it is. And you think, God, we need to do better, So it's, I think at the end of the day, everyone up here, especially today, the top 8 will be a great mayor, because I think their heart is in it. At the end of the day, it's about, compassion and integrity, and I think all of the candidates have that. So
I think that's great. That was a great way to end it.